Hey, it's Grayson Peltier here again. Had to come to you on this situation with AmberLynn Reid. I'm not entirely familiar with her situation, but I do know that a YouTuber by the name of Alan Roberts goes by let's say every darn day fitness on YouTube. That's not the actual name. I just changed it because I didn't want to swear here. Um, he's been going through her whole situation with she weighs well over 500 pounds. She posts on YouTube videos about her trying to lose weight, even though unfortunately she has actually gained weight since she has started doing YouTube. And she's tried a lot of different diets, but now she is starting a diet called Optavia, which appears to be a meal replacement shake program with like meal replacement shakes and bars that's sold through a multi-level marketing structure. Um, and Mr. Roberts rightly points out that she has what he terms a food addiction, and at times uses that term interchangeably with binge eating disorder, and that she needs to seek psychological and other medical help for that particular condition. That's what I like about it, is that it's not the immediate, simplistic, reductionistic, you just need to lose weight, even though he does, obviously, with swear word right in the channel name, he's a little bit abrasive at times, which I can understand, appreciate. So Mr. Roberts will go in and he says repeatedly that she needs to be in psychological counseling. Absolutely. Needs to be in needs to possibly consider going to inpatient placement, which unfortunately, from my knowledge and experience with health insurance, is probably easier said than done. So that probably would help her, but probably be difficult to get that paid for by insurance because a lot of policies have exclusions for weight loss related treatments. Although, if binge eating disorder, I believe it is considered a mental health problem, she probably it could potentially be fodder for something under the Wellstone and Dominici Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. But obviously, anytime you have a dispute with insurance, it takes forever and ever to resolve. I have personal experience with that. But what I want to kind of get into is this whole concept of food addiction and sort of our understanding of addiction itself. Full disclosure, I'm not a medical professional. I have never had an addiction problem. I've had mental health issues. I've never actually had an addiction problem specifically. And if you're dealing with what you suspect to be a medical condition or mental health condition, I would implore you to contact your primary care physician and check in with them. But now disclaimer's done. Had to get disclaimer off my chest. Should have done it sooner. So Mr. Roberts makes the point that these Optavia bars and shakes are sweet. They have different flavors similar to what you'd find in like what we loosely defined as junk food or candy bars or things of that nature. And he says that, well, she needs to sort of the whole cold turkey theory of addiction. She needs to quit it. She can't derive any more pleasure from food. And that if she doesn't like the food, if the food makes her regurgitate, that is actually a positive development because she cannot derive any further pleasure from food. Well, I think that this is actually sort of a flawed understanding of addiction. Obviously, Mr. Roberts has more experience than I do. He apparently completed some studies in the field of healthcare administration at the University of Phoenix. Doesn't say on his LinkedIn whether or not he has a degree in that field, but he does have experience in the health and fitness industry. My qualifications are not related to that field. The closest thing I have is an associate's in social and behavioral sciences from Coastline College. My undergrad was in political science at USC, so I'm not a expert in the area of healthcare or weight loss. But my understanding from some of the research that's come out, looking at these addiction problems from a policy perspective and from the perspective of what is available as far as treatment is that, number one, for obesity, medical treatment is very difficult to obtain because funding is very limited. Oftentimes by insurance companies, they'll go and they'll find a way to deny something. I know my own policy actually has something where even if you want to get medication for an obesity related condition, like weight loss medication, something like phentermine, you have to fail a weight loss program, and they have a weight loss program that's run by the insurance company. So it's a multiple step process. And that's a shame because you have people that get to where Miss Reid is, we're very overweight and in serious condition where she could potentially succumb to obesity-related medical complications, which costs even more. But yeah, so there is some constraints on that. So even if inpatient was necessary, that makes it more difficult. But then the other thing is that, going back to that topic of medication, is that for a lot of addiction-related conditions, a medication-assisted approach works well. Mr. Roberts mentioned opioid addiction. For opioid addiction, actually, some of the best outcomes have come from medication-assisted treatment options where you're using something like methadone or Suboxone, something like that. And that treatment is often unavailable. There are constraints on that as to number of patients a doctor can take. There are constraints, I think, for methadone on the number of doctors that can prescribe it. There's an application process. So people with opioid addiction are not getting effective treatment. They're just being told to just quit, go through withdrawals, when in fact, if they got the medication treatment could improve their outcomes significantly. For something like cigarettes, obviously, it's very common that you have you have nicotine replacement treatment. You have like Nicorette gum and patches and stuff like that. Obviously, those have been FDA approved. They've been on the market for a long time. Some insurances cover them. Particularly if you're in like a publicly funded program, they'll give you patches for free. At least in my state, in California, that's the case. Maybe different in other states. But those treatments are effective when you're replacing it. So if we transfer it over to the situation of food, it's not necessarily a matter of cold turkey potentially, because he rightly mentions you have to eat to survive. To some extent, every person has to eat in order to survive, at least at some point. And you have to be exposed to it. And food, of course, has inherent stimuli, negative stimuli, depending upon or positive stimuli depending upon your taste. And he criticizes the Optavia program for giving too much of stimuli that AmberLynn Reid would actually like. And even though I don't know if there's any literature published on this in cases of binge eating or food addiction, and I don't know if she's receiving the medication treatment. There is a medication treatment that's FDA approved for binge eating disorder, if that's actually her diagnosis, if she's receiving medication treatment. But I think it's possible, and on smoking in particular, in smoking, they found that oftentimes the e-cigarettes are more effective than gum and patches because they deliver nicotine, and they also sort of have that behavioral feeling of smoking. So it can be that actually a replacement, in many cases for different types of addiction, a replacement that is less harmful and that helps gradually wean a person off of addiction might actually be helpful rather than just quitting them cold turkey, or as he says, no pleasure derived from food. Again, this is just my own personal opinion on an issue I believe is of public significance, but it's something that I think is probably a theory that's worth exploring to some extent. Whether or not this Optavia is any good, I can't comment on that. We do know is that there are different addictions where you can treat it by offering a replacement. So theoretically, it could be true, it's in the realm of possibility that by replacing larger quantities, 6,000 calories a day of food, with a food that is in an appropriate quantity and desirable by the person involved, that could actually lead to better outcomes. Another aspect of this behaviorally, in my opinion, that I think is relevant is game theory, because in game theory you sort of have two players. You have two players involved, and the more you get little bits of cooperation, the more buy-in there is. If there's a bigger leap for cooperation, you have that big leap, to cooperate, of completely going off of food that induces pleasure, however that's measured. That's a bigger leap. But by showing smaller levels of cooperation, by cooperating with a program that has food that may be somewhat desirable to the participant, then you can cause buy-in, and you could possibly cause them to get to a point where they may become dependent upon that particular path, and so it has sticking power. And then the other thing you want to look at is systems thinking. You have a phenomenon that's called fixes that fail. So you have these thresholds in your mind where, like, if this stimulus goes this high or this goes to this level, then your systems are going to regulate that. You're going to regulate your behavior. You're going to regulate how you react. Machines do this too. They're programmed. If they're at a particular threshold, then it's going to react. So what you have to do is you have to kind of figure out how not to sort of shock the system so that it'll cooperate with you, and you're not implementing a fix that's going to be automatically corrected. Because if you take it all the way up here, it's going to try to bring it back down here. But if you only bring it up to here, you don't hit this little invisible threshold here. And that invisible threshold doesn't get set off. And then over time, you may develop a level of conditioning because there are delays and feedback. So if you're like here, and you keep going up here, there'll be a delay in the feedback, and then eventually you'll be up to here because the feedback, the thing that pushes it down back here, that system hasn't been activated yet. Those are some possibilities as to why perhaps an approach that isn't as strict would be helpful. But then, of course, you have the significant psychological. We don't know if there's different types of psychological trauma, those types of things that should be addressed by a mental health professional and by a healthcare professional in her case, and that absolutely should be done. But I just wanted to say that I think that perhaps the immediate, strict, lay the law down approach for addictions and all kinds of adverse behavior might not be the best approach, and that there may be potentially other options, of course, given the individual nature of the situation. This situation is exceptional because it could result in death very quickly. And that is also a factor that is to be weighed. Again, I'm only giving my own personal opinion on this issue, and if you are in this situation, if you're in some sort of mental health situation where you suspect binge eating disorder or any other kind of medical condition, I would implore you to get assistance from qualified healthcare professionals. Everything I'm saying here, none of it is obviously advice that you should take. It's just information for you to consider, and entertainment if you feel like it's entertainment. I certainly hope it is. I haven't done anything funny just yet. I haven't made you laugh. But if it's entertainment, then I'm glad. And hit the like button if you found this entertaining or in any way informative. I was going to do a whole video sort of on the sort of sociology and the social issues involved with my 600-pound life and some of these extreme weight loss related shows. This is a little taste of it. Sorry for the bad pun there. If I made you laugh, again, hit the like button. But hopefully you got something of value of that. Feel free to leave any comments in the comment section. And I'll try to come back to you with some more interesting takes on the social issues surrounding some of the most interesting things you find online and offline. My new podcast, DIY Tactics, Gnarly Civics, and Reality, is launching soon. I just got my intro episode actually uploaded, podcast.graysonpeltier.com. There are some episode notes for some podcasts that have yet to be uploaded, so you want to take a look at those. That podcast is more about developing bottom-up strategies to change major issues in society. You might see that little blurb on weight loss and these extreme weight loss shows mentioned there at the end of the intro episode. And I might go a little bit more into this stuff on the podcast, but a lot of these same principles I explained, systems thinking, game theory, can be applied to a lot of areas where you have dynamic behavior and you have actors, even if it's actors that are within a single person at an n equals 1 sample. A lot of these are very applicable to solving problems with the social and behavioral component. All right. Until next time, peace.